איזה כיף.
We're live.
עומר, ready?
I'm ready. Yes, I am.
And ready and action, action,
I need to come
action,
more prepared.
action.
More prepared.
Every time we say we'll come with props,
And
but no
nothing
props.
happens.
Not good, not good.
Okay.
Okay, so today's topic, wait, first of all, this is our 16th
Ooh,
session.
that's a lot.
Omer, we've
Sounds
come
like
this
a lot.
far. Every time we come by like with one more episode, I'm like, wow, it's another one. So today's topic, okay, it's going to be very interesting. Like always, it's going to be on backups and then effects.
Ooh,
Backups. Okay. Omer, what's
yes.
the first thing that comes up to your mind when I say backups and let's say DevOps?
I already used the joke last week of I don't have anything, so I won't do that. What's the first thing? To be honest, probably for most people in the world, the first thing that comes to their mind is server backup, right? Creating some kind of data backup because something I'm going to lose something. I need to back up my stuff. I need to back up my databases. I need to back up my images for my machines. That's not backup for me, by the way. My backup is actually going to a whole different. Maybe you didn't even think about where I'm going to take it.
Okay.
Backup for me is mostly around disaster recovery, and by that I mean backing up my infrastructure, and by that I mean having everything templated, which takes me to another topic, maybe infrastructure as code, but not only that. What I want to say is I want to have everything backed up as code. You know what I'm saying? Not backed up as
Mm-hmm.
data, which is another aspect, and we can talk about that and touch up on that. But to me, having everything as code, every changes, whether that's the application code, the code base of whatever I'm managing, obviously the infrastructure, all my automated tooling, everything around my Kubernetes clusters, my serverless lambdas, even my EC2s. As long as I have things managed as code, templated, infrastructure as code again, I'm fine. I feel like I'm backed up in that sense. So that's the first thing that comes up to my mind. How about you?
I'd go for database backup. No idea why. Maybe more people will say that like backup, and then I'll jump on. Oh, yeah, I need to back up my database.
Mm-hmm.
This is like what I'm thinking of. And also, I would think, but that's not a real backup. But when we say like if it's an association game, so to back up my code, I'm thinking like in the 90s. So
Mm-hmm.
to back up my code and stuff that I did, you remember before Git, we used to do like okay, version one, version two, version three, where you rename the files to back them up. You know.
Yeah.
So this is how I think of backups. I think this is what comes up to my mind when I think about it.
Okay.
Okay. So now let's do a deep dive. Let's do double click on many things on backup. I think we can talk like hours on this topic.
Yeah.
So
Our challenge here is to stay focused rather than
yes,
finding what to talk about.
exactly. So I'll just try to do some double click. Okay. So you talked about backup and infrastructure as code.
Yes.
Okay, and let's say I have infrastructure as code. I'm using Terraform, CloudFormation, whatever. What do you mean by backup in infrastructure as code? If I already have a stack, an infrastructure as code stack, how do I use backup as code?
Yeah. So what I'm referring to is to the literal sense of the word backup, right? Because when you speak about backups in the world of software and infrastructure, you're probably speaking about something like more like what you said, backing up my data, backing up my database, and I have something to say about that too. But when you say the word backup, it means something is backing me up. I'm going to have an issue. And in my world of terminology and things that I deal with, the feeling of being backed up by something, intuitively, I'm going to the world of having my things templated. So if something really bad happens, and if you speak with a DBA and you tell them something really bad is going to happen, I think intuitively is going to think about his database either being deleted, flushed, scratched, whatever. For me, it's infrastructure getting deleted, infrastructure is getting bugged with mistakes or things that people didn't mean to change and push stuff they didn't mean to. And now I need to kind of revive my backup. And my way to revive things is to run my templates and to make sure they're up to date and to make sure that everything is aligned and in sync. And this way I can control. This way I feel backed up. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. I didn't like. I still want some example of that. I mean, when I say example, I mean like. So I understand that you talk about infrastructure as code. That this is what backs you up. So if something fails, you can spawn it again or recreate it again, even if it failed. Right? That's the
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. All right. Okay. So I have a question like that. Let's say I have a database. Doesn't really matter which. DynamoDB, maybe it's an Elasticsearch or any database,
Yeah.
any form of database.
Yeah.
How do you test that you can really, your disaster recovery mechanism? Like, what are your steps? How do you approach that? So let's say there is a disaster, or before the disaster, how do you test your disaster recovery plan for your database? No matter which database.
It's a loaded subject. Easiest thing in the world. Okay. Sorry. Let me take it even a step further, or a step backwards, rather. I tend to go, generally, in my professional life, quote unquote, I generally tend to go for managed services. And this is one of the main reasons, because I want to have backups. And not only I want to have backups, because you can backup anything, especially if you're running on a cloud provider, I want to have automated backups. So let's take your example with RDS, was it? Or Dynamo, for example?
Doesn't really matter.
Fine.
Yeah.
Both are managed services, regardless of the intricacies of what each of them can do. They provide you the mechanism of, again, automating your backups. So in RDS, for example, you can set a weekly window or a daily window, whatever you choose, where it's going to take a snapshot and keep that, obviously with a rotation policy that you can decide how long do I want to keep my backups back in time. And that provides me the kind of the safety of having the ability to revive my stuff. So you asked then, how do I plan for that? Or how do I operate the plan that I set in place? And it's simple as taking a snapshot and reviving it, whether that's in the same location, I mean, same environment, or on another region, or in another AWS account. But as long as my snapshots are being taken regularly, that is something I can do. Now, we can take it a step further. I'm not really doing that, but you can copy your snapshots across regions or availability zones, or even just accounts to make sure that if the account gets deleted and completely scratched, you can revive it somewhere else. And I think AWS in their they have this best architecture or best practice architecture. They have a white paper, and they call it a pilot light. I hope I'm not butchering the term, but
I think it's a well-architected framework, something like that, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, my friend. So in the well-architected framework, one of the concepts of being able to operate in disaster recovery is having a pilot light. I don't think this specifically speaks to database backups, but if I'm reducing it or extrapolating to the same subject, it means having a small tiny thing that you can spin up immediately. I think they were referring more to containers or servers, just having a small server sitting in place with an autoscaling group, not doing much, like a micro instance. And then once you need and something happens and your production is in flames, you can kind of scale it up, on demand, and have the same infrastructure reoperating on another place. So I'm thinking you can do that with backups now that we're speaking. I'm not saying I'm doing it. My method is having snapshots taken in an automated manner through the managed service and then reviving them. And yes, we have to, I think, test it quarterly. We're obliged to do that. So that's what I do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and do you ever play like Chaos Monkey? Like, let's say you wake up in the morning, you tell one of the developers, listen, today we are going to have a game. And then you tell them, today I'm going to lead dev database, okay, the development database.
We could have had episode 17th of our podcast speaking about chaos engineering. Now we're going to so let's say a word about that and keep that as a topic. What do you say? Okay.
Sure.
So to your question, no, I don't. But if
you
were to ask, I don't, but I really want to. I used to do it in the past where I felt like I can. I don't think I'm at a point where I can do that. Working at a startup, things are built well, but not to the point that I can run a Chaos Monkey that will completely demolish subnets or availability zones. I'm not there yet. I would really wish.
No, just database. Let's say just going for, okay, so in order to feel safe, like the best way to feel safe is to fall down in in shallow water, right? To drown in shallow water. So if development is dead, let's say taking the development database and you just break it down and take it down. Then you can really practice and see how much time does it take to restore, how much time does it take till the first developer notices that, so you can really measure stuff if you just do it randomly
But
without telling anyone.
Okay, would you do that in production today? If I tell you now, test it, would you?
No, not in production. No, not in production.
Okay.
I'm talking just about development. We'll get to production in a second, but development, like, would you? Okay, so let's say you're in a team with, I don't know, 20 developers. Some of them are working locally. Some of them are working with development environment. QA are working with staging, blah blah. And then you say, okay, I don't feel comfortable with my development environment. I feel like if production falls down, if production breaks down, then our rollback or our disaster recovery plan for the database is not so good. So I have an idea. Let's delete production development database and see what happens. What do you say about that? Is it a good thing?
Yeah, okay. You're asking whether I do that, whether I'm prepared, or whether that's a good thing to have.
Two things. So are you doing that? If yes or no, whatever, like, is it a good thing? Is it something you think people should do?
Yeah, okay. I'm not doing that, not intentionally. By the way, what's better than coffee in the morning?
What?
Don't you know the joke? Deleting a production database. It'll keep you wake up for long hours. No, I'm not doing that intentionally. Yes, I do think it's a good idea. No, I don't think it's a good idea as a general practice, because at the end of the day, we're all monkeys. And if that's the only thing I'm going to test, at some point that would be some kind of a KPI. So me or the other engineers on the team would kind of start aligning themselves around this one database or a few RDS instances that I'm going to just throw out of the window on dev environment. So they'll get focused on that. But what happens if I kill Elastic, or I kill a cache instance, or I delete a table on DynamoDB? Am I ready for that? And the answer is yes, I am ready, because I try to use managed services and I try to automate my backups. But no, I'm not sure it'll be as easy. You know what I'm saying? So I try to keep myself kind of distributed, and I kind of try to manage everything in an automated manner so I can control that and be confident that it'll be all right.
Okay, and let's say your RD, okay, moving on to production. So let's say, and I'm talking about like a real situation, okay? Don't be gentle. Let's say the truth, okay? It's hard, but we need to say the truth. So let's say your production now database, for some reason, I don't know, some CI/CD process had administrator permissions, maybe a user with proper privileges was able to delete the database, but the database is gone. But when I say gone, I mean applicative gone. Okay, let's not, they didn't go to the AWS and delete the whole RDS, but it's gone. Okay, or maybe even they did, and you still have a snapshot of that database. How do you restore it? And you are now paying money. So for each minute that you are down, you owe customers money. Okay, so how do you do it as fast as you can if that happens?
Pretty sure manually. I don't have a good idea for that. I do have one thing to say about that, though. If you need to restore a database, I don't see any other way around of having the database change its connection string, right? Because it's going to be a new endpoint. And to mitigate that, you can do two things. One, obviously, you can set a DNS record, or hopefully an internal one. If we're speaking about AWS, wherever you're running, set an internal DNS record, that you can kind of point to the endpoint of your database. And that way, if something changes, you need to make stuff. I mean, things do change even if they're planned, right? At some point, you will probably replace that connection string. And if you want to eliminate work of developers in the process, they can only target themselves to the DNS record, and there are no issues, because what you're doing is kind of under the hood, right? You're replacing the connection string, but you're updating the DNS record accordingly. So that's one.
So you still have, like, it's not the DNS record is updated automatically. You're saying let's have 1 point of update, right?
So exactly what you said. So we're speaking about a manual change. Another option is obviously to set your DNS record to point. Actually, I'm not sure, speaking about RDS, whether that's an option to keep it automated. Maybe it is, I'm not sure, not aware of it.
Automated for what?
like having an internal record that points to an RDS instance and changes accordingly if something happens to that instance?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm doing something like that for ECS.
And
Like
that
when a
does
task
change.
is ready, then go change something. But that's a Lambda
Yes,
function,
and that
But
right, and it can be connected to a target group. So anyway, let's go back to the point. So one option is to have that. Yes, the changes are going to be manual. Another option, or not another option, another layer that you can set is an RDS proxy. It's not set for that, but it's an option. The proxy serves in this scenario as another layer because developers will be pointed at that proxy, and you can replace the instance, put it again under that proxy, and the proxy, has the same connection string. So it has the same endpoint, and that communicates with the database. So you can replace the database under the hood. They keep connecting to the same thing. But proxy, well, it's a resource, so it costs to keep it alive. And I think basically the reason to have a proxy in the first place is for it mitigating the number of connections that are being held against the database. So if you're working in a serverless intense environment and you having a lot of connections because of that opened up against your databases, a proxy is one way to mitigate in that scenario.
How do you create an RDS proxy?
It's a managed service by AWS. Search for RDS proxy. You'll see the service. I was surprised to find it this year. I didn't know it was an option. I always knew you had, SQL servers, different kind of proxies, even open source one that you can set yourself. But that would put me in the process. That would put me in the chain, and I would be the single point of failure. I didn't want to do that, but ever since I found out there's a service, I immediately started using it.
Oh, so you're using the RDS proxy right now?
Yes,
like in one of your... Oh, nice.
Yeah. But basically to mitigate the number of connections.
Okay. So I think we covered the what happens if... Okay, so let's summarize that if production goes down, I think I also inclined to say the same, that you restore stuff manually. It's not optimal. It's not the best solution, but if we are paying money because customers are screaming and saying, listen, so we'll probably fix it manually as fast as we can. I think, I mean, in most cases. And I wonder if people in the crowd, where are they? if people in the crowd are saying but isn't it the whole purpose of DevOps where everything is automated? Why are you talking about doing stuff manually? How can you challenge what we just said? Omer, I think it's a conflict because we are like a few years in the industry. We know how to work. We do our stuff right. Yeah. Why are we saying that we are going to do it manually? What's wrong with us?
That's a great question. I'll give the short answer. Okay. To begin with, okay. We have our own capacity. We can't do everything. And there are too many things to be automated. So yes, while you can and probably should automate everything, it's hard to get to everything. That's one part of the equation. The other part is there are some things that are maybe too, now that's an opinion, obviously. Other people can have different opinions. I had a mentor once that told me the one thing in the world that it doesn't automate are DNS records. And for the simple reason that they are this was the center of the organization. The way he built stuff are all around that, connected to what I've said earlier with having a connection string under a DNS record internally that I've set. That would be the center of how he builds infrastructure. And if that's failing, everything's failing around what he built. So the one thing that wasn't automated on his end was the DNS records. I tend to follow that to some degree. That's the short answer. Let's keep it short.
Okay. I hate to, and I also want to know if you are also like that. It's a bit, steering off the backups. I'm just wondering, so you said, because we talked about automated and manual. So I also try to avoid creating ACM, the certificates, HTTPS certificates.
Yes.
With my infrastructure as code, I tend to do it manually in the AWS console.
But that has a good
reason.
Do
you also do that?
It has a good reason.
Yeah?
Yeah, because when we're totally deviating here from the subject, but when you create an ACM, for the listener who isn't familiar, is the AWS Certificate Manager, I hope. Mm-hmm. Anyway, a manager for certificates that you can provision on AWS. And the reason is when you create a certificate anywhere, an SSL certificate, you have to pass some kind of challenge in order for it to provision successfully. That can be a DNS record that you set. Again, going back to DNS, it can be, I think, an email that you control the domain. You need to prove in some way. that the domain is yours and you can create a certificate. And for that reason, having it templated doesn't help you much because you can start the process. But what happens in the gap? Sometimes it can take hours until it's approved.
Yeah, that's the reason I do it, because of the challenge. And then I thought to myself, maybe I need to automate the challenge. And then I'm like, okay, I don't have time for this. So let's just create it manually.
Yes.
It's a one-time thing. I'm not going to do it again. Okay.
Right.
So we touched backups. Yeah, go ahead.
So I have another thing to say about backups, which I think intuitively comes up to listeners, and I want to know what you think about it. We touched on the standard things. We touched on data. We touched on, I don't know, infrastructure as code. And I think another thing that comes up to mind, the next thing is what happens if I have EC2 instances, right? So the first thing that I think of is creating any AMIs, maybe periodically, maybe not. I don't know. Obviously, if you're running the next thing that I'm not happy to say, but if you have a Jenkins server, you're probably backing this up that way.
Hang on. You're saying AMIs. Why not creating a snapshot and then restore to AMI? Like, why are you going to AMIs? Why not a snapshot?
It doesn't. I'm making another point. Let's speak about that. Let's put a pin in that. So where I'm going with this is, yes, you're right. You can take a snapshot. You mean a volume snapshot? That's what you meant?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Another option. For someone who doesn't understand, let's again put a pin in that. We'll touch on that in a second. What I was saying is why don't you think how to decouple the data completely from the instance? Now, that's not always the case, not always optional. And I know I'm talking about my scenario where most of my things are managed services. If you're running your own service, that's not as easy. But I think in a lot of scenarios, you can find yourself being able to decouple the data away from the instance. And that way you don't have to create an AMI. You don't have to create a snapshot of the volume because the volume is what you call ephemeral. You can lose the data. It'll be all right because it's only a cache mechanism, maybe something that's stored elsewhere. Again, that's the point. To your next point, yes, of course. The next step is to not create an entire AMI of the entire instance because that would probably be a little bit of a waste. The smarter thing to do is what you just said. Create a snapshot of the volume and back up the data itself because hopefully you keep your data stored on the EBS volume that's attached and the instance doesn't matter. And now to the worst scenario, I think, if I'm not mistaken, when you run a Jenkins server, that's going to be an issue because yes, your data, which holds the pipelines, and I hope the configurations too will be held there. But I think if you create only I'm not sure, it's been years since I worked with it, but it may become an issue because the configuration of the server itself can get lost. I'm not sure about what I'm saying. We'll need to check.
Can you in Jenkins, I'm not sure, but can you save everything like, so in Nexus, right? You can have like S3 backed up, data. So you can save your data in S3 where it's backed up instead of saving it on a volume. So maybe it's the same in Jenkins where you can save everything backed up in S3, like that's in JFrog. I think they also have that.
Exactly. So JFrog, Artifactory, Nexus, they're all built around having backups and having the data stored elsewhere, whereas Jenkins is built around bad practices.
But you can also use, I'm not sure if Jenkins needs like a very, very high speed of read and write. I don't think so, but you can use AWS as an elastic file system if you want to, preserve the data, and you also have a point-in-time recovery for that. So if everything gets lost, you can get to a point in time and recover that. So it's nice.
So that's a good point. Specifically to EFS, well, I'll say one sentence about it. I try to shy away from it. It has its benefits. It's elastic. It can grow and shrink. You can multi-attach with ease to many servers if you'd like. But the performance is a little bit of an issue. So in my case,
it depends.
It depends, exactly. In my scenarios where I use EBS volumes, it's mostly for servers that do actually need them and need to be performant, and EFS might not be the best solution in that case. So that's a little bit of a star comment to put there.
But if you have money, you can, and I hope you have money, but you can have some dedicated throughput. So you can pay, but it costs a lot of money. So I think it's like $10 per 1 megabyte per second or something. I'm not sure about the prices. We need to check in AWS, but the pricing is high, but you can have like a very high throughput if you want.
You're pushing me to a corner to say that if you don't have money, just call Zesty, because that's what we do, and we'll help you with having your file system elastic. but that's besides the point. And yes, you're right. You can provision that. Sure.
So that's a sentence. If you don't have money, just call Zesty. Ka-ching, right?
Ooh, okay. I'm going to use that.
Okay. So we talked about so EFS. You're referring to your Jenkins issue. So generally speaking, I love what you said about the EC2 instances and decoupling stuff. So every time you hear EC2 instance, you're tending to go with maybe save my data in S3 or maybe save it on EFS if I don't care about performance. Also, S3 is also not very performant. It's only for backups,
right.
You know?
Totally. It's an object store, not where you want to, keep your data as a hot source of your data. Definitely.
Okay, so since we're like, I don't know, 25 minutes in, and I think we can keep talking about backups and every AWS.
Forever. We didn't even start touching about database clusters and how do you handle Elastic. Yes.
Okay, so I say we need to move to the corner. Are you ready to the corner?
Totally ready, yes.
You know, it's funny because like after 10 episodes, we just decided that we have a corner. So, corner of the week.
I think you also made up a term. I don't think that's an actual English word, but yes.
But yeah, that's the thing. It's the corner of the week. So corner of the week. Yeah, facts. Okay. So now that we are in the corner of the week where Omer and I share our experience this week. So Omer, would you like to share an experience or technology or anything else that you want to share about that you experienced this week?
I'd be very happy to share, yes. I have
so go ahead and do that.
Can I share too?
You can share too.
Okay. Do you know VS Code's ability to create a remote environment where you can kind of use a headless VS Code and run that in a remote container? Do you know that ability?
I know. Okay, so there is a server like VS Code server. Are you referring to that, the open source VS Code server?
I'm not sure that's what I'm referring to, but VS Code has a plugin where you can connect your IDE from your local host to a remote environment and kind of work on top of the server, but having the IDE experience locally. That's what I'm referring
to. That's okay. So no. Okay, talk about it. Share.
In any case, that's a plugin. VS Code has that functionality. I discovered by someone who had actually contacted me on LinkedIn, and they have an open source project for NeoVim, the same. And if you know me, you know I like NeoVim. So NeoVim can now provide the same functionality. So you can basically install NeoVim, by the way, can work in a headless mode. That's just a functionality. But you can install that plugin and work remotely on a server. So if you have some kind of remote server on AWS or any other cloud platform, and you need to, for some reason, run very heavy processes and you want to run them there, but still have your local working environment, that's something you can do. That's the one thing.
You got me confused over there because you started talking about VS Code and I was like, what's Omer doing? And then you moved to NeoVim and I was like, okay, got
it. Just for reference, of course, yes. I don't have it installed on my machine. No one can.
Yeah, I was like, what's he talking about? What are you talking about? Okay, yeah.
No, my computer doesn't know VS Code. Okay, so that was the first thing. The other thing is a really cool project, that I've just seen today. I'm not yet sure how to utilize it, but there is a project that's called test containers, and you can find them in many languages, Java, Go, Python, Ruby. They have one container for everything, and that's something you can integrate with your unit test. So your unit test, you can import the library and run a container. You can tell it what kind of image do you want, what kind of dependencies, and it will run your code as part of the unit tests inside a container, if that makes sense. It's just a shared library that you can use for testing inside container, and it's really cool.
Oh, cool. Okay, so you'll put that in the description, right?
Definitely.
Okay, so are you ready for mine? Because mine is a bit of a challenge.
Go ahead.
It's a challenge for you and the viewers because I don't think anyone has ever experienced that.
Okay.
And if they do, they didn't call Zesty. Okay? Okay. Okay. So let's say you have an environment, and it happened like in a side project. Okay, so a WordPress website, which is hosted on AWS ECS with a database hosted on RDS. Okay, AWS RDS, and it's Postgres. All right?
Mm-hmm.
And the data is saved on EFS. Okay? Bear with me on this one. It's ECS Fargate.
Can you do that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can you scale it?
Yeah, it works great. I mean, it works great. The website, it's not like it's WordPress, so you don't really need Like that, even if you have a very high load of traffic, you got the content delivery network, like the CDN in front of it that takes all the static files and whatever.
Yes.
So that's the infrastructure. Now, do you know, are you ready for the challenge? Do you know what happens if you don't pay to AWS, let's say for, I don't know, I think 1 month or 2 months, like if your payment method is expired and that's it. So you didn't pay for AWS for 1 month. Do you know what happens then to your infrastructure?
Nothing.
Aha. So I can tell you, that's the challenge. So now you think, okay, first of all, why would that happen? But it might, because maybe somebody stole your credit card and you forgot to update your credit card method in AWS, whatever. Yeah, and you didn't notice the emails, whatever. So apparently, when you go to a website, like HTTP, blah, blah, you find out the website is down. So you go to an AWS account, you cannot really log in. You got to log in as root, right? Because you didn't pay.
Right.
And then after you fix the payment method, you realize that your ECS service is not working, right? Because AWS, you're not paying, so why would they provision resources for you?
Right.
So what do? Your ECS service is set to desired tasks as one, okay? One desired task, but it doesn't work because AWS took it down. So what you'd say, probably, okay, so you can just set it to 0, wait, and then set it to 1 back. It will reset it. No, amigo, no. You have to delete the service and then recreate it, okay? Another thing, the database. You would think that they just stop your database and that's it. You just need to rerun it, right? Because you can't stop RDS for like 2 weeks or something like that. I'm not sure, but something like that. So apparently they just delete your database. So you have to restore the database from one of the automated snapshots.
Isn't that a perfect ending to an episode that speaks about backups?
Yeah.
Backup your payment method. Definitely.
Yeah, so apparently if you forget to update your payment method, it's a big issue. I mean, because if you're in a production environment, think about the time that it takes to realize, okay, so it takes time to realize you need to delete the service, recreate it, you need to restore the database. And also, Omer, you talked about internal DNS services. So if I restore the database and I create a new one, my RDS endpoint was changed, right?
Of course.
So I need to go back to the ECS, create a new task definition, change the environment variable of the RDS endpoint, and so it takes time.
DNS entry, Meir.
Yeah. So yeah, it takes me back to what we talked in the beginning. Internal DNS entry for RDS might be a good thing to do, especially if you don't pay.
I think you can write a book of your edge cases with AWS. Right.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has ever or will ever experience that, but just in case you wondered, like it's a unicorn, it can happen, but it's not there. Yeah.
Nice. So for summary, an episode that speaks about backups, backup your shit.
Yeah, that's the slogan.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you everyone. Thank you for listening, for coming, for attending, for viewing.
From all over the world, by the way, from London and from Spain this time. Next time it's going to
And from Spain. Yeah, hola from Spain.
Yep.
So let's talk again next week.
Yep. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.